Welcome. It feels like too long since the beautiful Faye and I have graced your YouTube screens, but here we are once more. Thank you for joining us. I am Abi Adams, Fay Reid, Charlotte Fowles, confident coach, Holly Dunn, nutritionist, although I feel that undermines exactly what she is. But anyway, we are here to discuss what happens when it goes missing. What, I hear you cry, when what goes missing? Well, this is our point. Because a lot of female health has gone missing and goes missing. And the sad thing is, most of us don't realise that it's gone. So this is why we're here to talk today. And we're going to start with an anchor, with something that a lot of you can probably relate to or you can understand. And that is when your period goes missing in action. I love saying that because I just get this kind of period archetype with Lara Croft style ensemble going out and searching for periods to bring them back home safely. We need to kind of work on that, I think, Holly, because that would be awesome.
I love you, Abby, but that description sounded like somebody was going into battle.
On the period. Amenorrhea. Amenorrhea. No.
Amenorrhea.
What happens when your period goes missing in action? What do you do? Well, just to offer a little bit before we allow Holly to take the lead on this with her wonderful knowledge and wisdom. There's been a couple of occasions that this happened to me. One was when I was living out in India and I was in an ashram and the food was vegetarian. There was no protein there. And I've always struggled with my digestion. And upon my return, my periods were missing for 3 months. And I wondered, what was that about? I'm not going to lie. I actually thought there was a spiritual awakening that occurred at the time because that's what someone told me. Later realised that I probably wasn't having enough protein. And then it happened again when I came back from India. Again, without living on that vegetarian diet, the periods went missing for 2 months this time. But I didn't think anything of it. Like I didn't think of the implications because I didn't know the deeper implications of when your period goes missing. Excuse me, my dog is scratching in the background. But what are they? And why is your period so important? Holly, over to you. The trumpets and the fanfare are playing behind me as I welcome you in.
Oh, thank you. Well, I mean, firstly, I think it is important to say that your periods can go missing and it can be entirely normal and natural, right? So pregnancy, breastfeeding, menopause, these are all times where a woman experiences natural amenorrhea, and that's not necessarily damaging to her health. We can kind of just put brackets around menopause for the moment because obviously there are certain health implications and reasons why we might want to intervene with hormones, etc., blah, 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 depending on the individual. But for everybody else, so for a normal cycling premenopausal woman or someone with a female physiology, then it's not the period itself. So amenorrhea essentially stands for absence of menorrhea, so absence of flow, absence of menstruation. It's not necessarily the period itself, that going missing, that's the problem. It's what that signals. So usually it signals anovulation, so the fact that ovulation hasn't happened. And that's the critical event, because that event causes the release and exposure to two really important hormones that really influence every single system in a woman's body. It's not just her reproductive system, it's her digestive system. You know, we've got estrogen receptors in our digestive tract. It's our brain chemistry, it's our stress response, it's our metabolism, it's our immunity. So it's a full-bodied, or rather kind of disembodied experience when a woman doesn't have a period when she's supposed to have that cycle working. So I hope, does that kind of help lead into kind of why it's such a huge, it's actually a really important thing.
That word disembodied that you used, I mean, that makes it a lot deeper, doesn't it? When you use that term, it's like, whoa, hang on a minute. What do you mean? disembodied. I mean, just my period disappeared.
Well, I don't use that term lightly. I think I use that term because this was like, you've experienced this, and I experienced this actually for 2.5 years, right? And I think the end result of that was, you know, I felt totally disconnected from my body, you know, anxious, exhausted, really just numb, emotionally numb, you know. And I think I use that term with a kind of a level of understanding of some of the women that I work with who are experiencing this, you know, are feeling, and it's really disempowering. And it's kind of the sense, as some women describe it, as just really feeling disconnected from their body. They don't feel like a woman anymore, you know. That whole part of them isn't functioning, and again, it's not really anything to do with fertility, but there's so much more to it. There's so much more to it than that.
Go on, Faye. Faye, you're on mute. It's going so well. It's going so well tonight.
I was gonna. My question was, Holly, have you always been in tune with your body? Like, have you always known? I've always been quite in tune with my body in terms of when I had my periods quite regular. I could know when I was ovulating. I could feel my egg ovulating. I'd get spots, or the night before my period, I just had the most horrendous sleep. So all those kind of things I was kind of in tune with. Were you in tune with your body when your period suddenly stopped, or did it take you really by surprise?
I think the answer, yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I think the answer to that is no, and I think that's the point. I think I had so little respect for, and I'm not meaning to say that the other women, people watching this, who may have amenorrhea, it's not that you have no respect for your body. Of course, you don't feel that. But looking back, I just, you know, I was, you know, working. We were talking before we started press record. Charlotte, you worked in corporate. You know, I was working in that environment, and it was this sort of hard, sort of high performing kind of environment, and I wasn't really treating my body with respect. I was just sort of, you know, getting up, working out, having a coffee, all meals eaten at my desk, like not really thinking about what I'm eating. And I think, no, I think it took that experience for me. Now I'm connected to my body, and it's the first time in my life, you know, for the last few years, I've, you know, I also get that kind of ovulatory twinge. It's like a twinge, isn't it? And these now it's a wonderful experience because I love all of those little signals, and I love understanding what's happening. But no, definitely no, I didn't. I didn't understand.
I do think it's interesting. Definitely stuff around hormones, how women feel, periods and stuff. Like, I started my menopause when I was 45, and for the first 5 years, I had a regular period, regular as clockwork, as I normally did, regular bleed and everything. And there's the whole myth that, well, I say it's a myth because it does happen. The whole thing is your periods stop. That's the big indicator of the menopause, which isn't exactly true. I had other symptoms like sweats, which was how I knew I was going through the menopause and such forth. What kind of things could trigger, and I can't pronounce the word, so I'm going to let you say it again.
Amenorrhea.
Amenorrhea. Sorry.
Amenorrhea.
Well, I think the answer to that is I've just got to clarify here that what we're actually talking about, and you're not going to like this, Faye, because this is a really long word, but we're actually talking about something called functional hypothalamic amenorrhea. Okay.
Seriously? I can't say that.
I want you to say that either now, Faye.
Let's call it each day. Right.
No, I don't like either.
There are other causes of amenorrhea. Okay, so like the important part of this is it's usually it's a diagnosis of exclusion. So there are other things that cause amenorrhea. There are structural abnormalities, conditions like Asherman syndrome, polycystic ovarian syndrome. There are other problems that can happen that can mean a woman can miss her period. So what we're talking about is this diagnosis of exclusion. Everything else has been ruled out, still no period. Doctor then says, okay, well, this is what you have. And what causes it is some form of stress on the body. Now that's high level. what actually causes it are things like poor nutrition, underfueling in particular. It happens a lot in athletes, so over-exercise. So this mismatch between energy intake and energy output, so low energy availability. That can be relative as well. So what I mean by that is you can be eating enough overall throughout the day, but if you're actually in a kind of in a fasted state for most of the day, and then say eating everything at nighttime, that can trigger it in some people, because we're all different. We all have, a lot of women have a genetic predisposition to this. So there's the food element. There's also the nuanced food element. And that's why I love that, Abi, you mentioned at the beginning about you really felt that a vegetarian diet really wasn't working for you, right? Because maybe there was protein, maybe there was a micronutrient, maybe there was an infection that you had as well. We'll come on to that. But there's also the nuance of the nutrition, and are you actually getting the right nutrients to support ovulation? And it gets really complex, like in terms of all of the different interactions of these different kinds of nutrients with the way our reproductive system works. And then there are other kinds of stresses. So there might be physical, psychological stress, pain, chronic pain that can also raise cortisol, conditions like celiac disease, which cause inflammation. They're very strongly linked to amenorrhea. We don't entirely know why. So it could be inflammation, could be malabsorption. So different types of physiological stress. You don't actually have to feel stressed to develop amenorrhea that's caused by some form of stress, if that makes sense, because we tend to think about stress as being something that we feel frantic and anxious, when actually stress affects us all in different ways, and it affects the body in different ways as well.
Interesting. And Charlotte, I wanted to ask you, in terms of kind of the stuff that you do and encountering women that are potentially going through what Charlotte said, kind of what's your approach to kind of, I don't know, Charlotte, I mean, Holly, I'm assuming that this was quite traumatic for you when this happened, and for you as well, Abi. And it's just interesting how you kind of coped with it, and Charlotte, how you kind of would help them to cope with it.
I think it's really interesting. Thank you so much, Holly, for all the information. I've experienced it myself at various times, mainly for me due to stress, for sure. And that, like you said, that can be many different things, and you can look like you're coping very well, but your body's carrying the strain. And I specialize in what I call transformational coaching. So it's quite a deep experience. It's not surface level. It's not just, we want to get to this goal, let's do this stuff and make a plan. There's a lot of value in that, but I like to go deeper. And I'm always talking about, we are not mind and body. The whole being is like an entire entity, and it's all connected. So certainly with people that I coach who have periods, I encourage them, because we have journals as one of the tools. I encourage them to make a note of their cycle day, not to give it any sort of credence or anything, but just what cycle it is, because the amount of times myself and clients have, when we're dealing with things in our minds and stories that we're telling ourselves, and all the things that impact how we feel about ourselves, what we believe, and how we go throughout the day. You'd be amazed at how much, maybe you wouldn't, but ovulation and lack of ovulation, or any stage, and everybody's slightly different personality, shall we say, in the month comes at a different stage. Like we use the phrase PMT, but I encourage people firstly to take a note of what day. So it's all about patterns and knowing yourself. So knowing your body, and your body is so important. So I teach my clients this from the beginning, that we can't actually make any changes unless we're very aware. So I talk about the A to E of what I do. The A stage is awareness, and that's like a full body, and I mean body and mind awareness, and that's really important. So if then it was to be there, it's a really good indicator that if you're having more awareness of your being and how you're moving through the world and how you're experiencing the world, then you've got it's a very good indicator. It would be like getting a massive rash or something. It's a really great indicator, because people say, oh, I don't feel very stressed. No, I think I've got it all under control. Well, trying to have things under control is actually a very big stressor. As the Elizabeth Gilbert says, you are afraid of surrender because you don't want to lose control. but you never had control. All you had was anxiety. So sometimes this need for control can create that. So in terms of helping people who then, if it's not there or it's missing, it would very much dealing with, okay, so this is a symptom of other things, and we obviously it needs addressing. That wouldn't be my specialism, but how is it impacting them? What led up to it? And when this is one of the reasons we keep quite detailed journals in my work, is so that we can actually look at what the patterns are, what both in thoughts and deeds that we do during the day, and are we creating the conditions that we want for our life? And often people come to this work because they want to make a change, and it can be very, very simple. And the other thing that's very interesting, actually, I think you mentioned at the beginning, maybe Abi, about what happens when it goes missing. Abi, is that it's really part of our identity. I know many of us, and I'm like, oh, for God's sake, here it is again. Like, you sometimes want to be rid of it, but suddenly when it's gone, you're like, oh, where the hell is it? Like, oh, actually, I do miss it. And it's when people have any sorts of treatments that impact how they feel as a person. It doesn't matter what gender they are, but for women, certainly our things like Holly was mentioning, like the hormones affect everything, you know, our sex drive, how we feel, you know, how we look, our identity. And I haven't got a diagram, but if I did, I would show you a triangle of what it's called neurological levels. And when we're trying to make changes in our life, we try to make a change to the things at the top of this triangle, because then it impacts sort of environment and behaviors. Now, near the top of that pyramid is identity. So purpose is first, identity, then beliefs and values. So when we work on those three, you can make much quicker, more effective, deeper, longer lasting changes on the others. And identity is really important. So if somebody came to me and they were missing this, or in the course of our work they had amenorrhea, we would look, you know, we'd see if there was an impact on their identity, because then that might lead to all sorts of other things, good, bad, indifferent, which may then impact, you see, underneath that is capabilities and behaviors, environment. So who you are, who you believe you are, who you identify, and your beliefs and all those sort of things impact what you do and what you say and how you feel. So that would be a really good strategy. I'd be like, well, you know, not just how you're feeling about it, but what are you causing to think about yourself in this space? So yeah, it's quite, there's a number of ways you could work with somebody depending on how it was impacting them.
It is.
Yeah, do you know,
really. Sorry, go on, Holly.
Yeah, I really love that you've talked about identity there, because what's so fascinating about this is actually one of the key things that keeps a woman in this, for a certain type of woman. I've got to be really careful here, because there's a lot of talk in the online space about amenorrhea as being synonymous with disordered eating, because it's very common in women with disordered eating. It's not the same thing. And I actually am going to do something on this, because I really need to create a little, I'm actually quite, as you can see, I get quite concerned about this. This is damaging for a couple of reasons. People with disordered eating, if they have a period, they may think they're okay. They're not sick enough. They don't need help, right? And for the people that have a period that's missing and don't identify with have disordered eating, they think, well, why has my period gone? Like, what's wrong with me? You know, they don't actually get the right support that they need. So it's a real problem for me, that problem. Now, in terms of the identity piece, though, for those women that maybe they're an athlete and their identity is really tied up in this high functioning person, and a product of that is unfortunately that they have amenorrhea, one of the struggles that they talk about is, okay, yeah, I really want to get my period back. I want to feel energized again. I want my sex drive back. I want to fall back in love with my husband, and I want all of these other things to happen, or, you know, wife or whoever it is, but partner. But the trouble is they don't want to lose their identity they've created, and they're really successful, and they associate having amenorrhea with their success, right? Because it's common in very much in the athletic community, where and up until very recently there were some real problems with people got into a lot of trouble, personal trainers and people saying, well, if you've lost your period, that's a good thing, you've pushed your body hard enough, right? So the identity thing doesn't matter how you look. I know it's terrible, but it doesn't matter how you look at this, the identity is always a critical factor for someone that's experiencing this, and unraveling that and understanding that for somebody and helping them to either come to terms with it or, you know, reconstruct their identity in a way that's still supporting them, whatever it is, that's always critical. So the work that you do, Charlotte, is always important in this. No matter what, you can do all the clinical stuff, you can look at the lab test results, you can suggest nutrition change, you can do XYZ, you can do supplements, whatever. But the mindset, that's always going to be an element, no matter how you look at it. There's usually something there.
It's interesting. In my training, they were using. They were trying to teach us this, you know, and help us learn the techniques and things. And one of the examples they used about identity was people giving up smoking. And often, of course, that is a chemical product. We know that, but we know lots of people approach giving up smoking in very different ways. And again, there's no one size fits all. But if we were going to think something that works for most people, it is around identity and beliefs. And they were saying, you know, if you say to someone says, "I'm a smoker," that's where you need to do that. And I don't love the word mindset, but I know what I use it because we know what it means, right? But that's where we'd be like, okay, interesting, because that, as opposed to, yeah, I smoke, right? So smoking is a behavior. I'm a smoker. I am. So if you ever think about yourself, because you will, or you write about yourself and you write I am statements, or I'm like, this is your identity.
I'm a runner.
So exactly. I'm definitely not a runner. And I'm proudly not one. I was for years and I hated every second of it. Anyway, but the smoking piece, right, is that was so interesting, something we can all identify with. We can all identify with that kind of, oh, I go running versus I'm a runner, or I'm a smoker versus I smoke. So and addressing that identity and actually getting into that, which is a lot less simple than people think, and it's fascinating, and it's why I love the work. So interesting about the athletics as well. I know quite well Marilyn Okoro, who used to be she was an Olympic 400-meter runner, and she's written a lot about the poor treatment of athletes, female athletes particular, in athletics, and she does a lot of work on that and a lot of speaking on that, and not necessarily to do with amenorrhea, and I haven't spoken to her about that, but she definitely has had, because of her particular body shape, which was bloody amazing if you ask me, but but because she didn't look like some other people who didn't look like her either, and everyone is, all athletes, you see them lining up for a race, they all look different, even though they're running the same race and they'd probably do the same training. And she certainly was criticized, which was effectively, it was her body shape. It wasn't anything to do with whether she was fit or not. And there was a lot of extremely poor treatment of so if anyone is interested in that, she talks on that a lot, and she's written a lot about it and her very poor experience. And it is really, I think it's really appalling, the body shaming. Can you imagine calling an actual professional athlete fat in any way, shape or form? But and what does that coach know? Like, they're just going, this is why lots of measurements are really unhelpful, right? Because they're going off I know we have to have some sort of standard like BMI, for example, but it's wildly variable for many of us, isn't it? It is outdated. It is. So many things like that are. And it's so difficult when you're making policy and stuff for mass. You got to start somewhere. But I think the nuance is where a lot of women's health goes missing. And a lot of other people's health too, but women's health for sure.
Do you know, I want to come back to identity, because, the big question is, what do you identify as a woman? What does being a woman mean to you? And when I ask women this, they kind of look at me and go, I don't actually to have children. Okay. But what else? What does, if you resonate with being a woman, what is that to you? Is it powerful? Is it soft? Is it compassionate? Like, what other identities are there that make your woman her whole? And
it's so complex, powerful, isn't it?
It's powerful. I remember as a young 30-year-old, and out of my 20s, where I was kind of running all over town and misbehaving and stuff, I had a moment. It was just like, oh, I'm a woman. It was maybe because there was more responsibility in my head to be aware of kind of what I was doing and what my body was capable of, and starting to think about children. And being sexual as well, all kinds of things that kind of defined in my head what a woman was. I think it definitely goes back to some of your beliefs that kind of shape and dictate how you think about certain things. And I suppose, yeah, I've always thought of a woman as being sexy, and it's only till my 40s and 50s of actually owning that sexuality. I've always felt a little bit like awkward with it prior to that. But yeah, it's weird. You could just go on a tangent with this one.
But how do you wear? Yeah, but how was you taught to wear your woman? You know, it's going to feel uncomfortable if you've never found the skin to sit comfortably in, isn't it? It's always going to feel uncomfortable. Once we step through that, you know, the emotional aspects of that and break down all of that conditioning and that the armor behind it, you know, whatever shape you hold is beautiful. You know, it's beautiful. And I think once we can get into that, you know, the comparison and the competitiveness as towards how someone looks against you, you know, it's a really crap, boring,
so prevalent everywhere, isn't it?
It's
and
what do you do? And as a woman, what do you lose? Like, we're talking about what goes missing, but what goes missing when you focus on that aspect? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's really the identity piece personally for me is really hard for many reasons, like it is for most people when you start to break that down, like because, you know, from a spiritual point of view, whenever you just say I am, like it's a really complex question. But certainly you mentioned children, and I've you know, I am childless, and I've had many struggles with trying to become a mother, and you know, there's miscarriage. I'm so sorry. Like, it's a hard place to be. And when do you stop? When do you stop trying? The word miscarriage, I'm sorry, I'm going to say this, but I fucking hate it. Like, you know, you are carrying, you have miscarried. Do you know what I mean? Like, so you have done something wrong. The language around female health is, in my experience, has not been brilliant. Like, but then this identity, you know, so and it's not like I've only ever thought that was my purpose, but there is really that again, this conditioning, Abby, that you mentioned, that, you know, we've all these sort of things, and I know many people, including myself, live very, very full lives without and child free. When people sometimes on the more positive side, they call themselves child free, and that's great. At the moment, I'm still in the childless space. So again, the nuance of the language really is really interesting, and the pain that goes with that, and the identity and the guilt and the shame is a huge one around. You mentioned sexuality, like, you know, when I work with people. And of course, I always mention the great Brené Brown and her work around shame. But you realize so much of what we learn, whether that's discipline or how we should look or what we should do, is all shame based. And we like to keep people in line with shame, you know, and it's just so fucked up. Like it, and then, you know, so is there any wonder that when you have an experience, the first thing you do is like, I didn't keep it safe. I couldn't keep it there. My body doesn't work. I'm wrong. Like, you know, all of those things. And it's very, very damaging. So it's a struggle. That identity piece is a struggle. I remember a therapist said to me, what sort of mother did you want to be? You could be a mother without children. And to be honest, I still think that's one of the most depressing things I've heard in my life. And I was like, I don't think I can identify with that. You know, I could probably embrace a child. I embrace my child-free life. As some of you know, I live a fabulous life, traveling all over the place and having a great time. However, like, I'm not sure I was ready, or I'm still, to be that kind of, yes, I'm a mother that had multiple babies that never made it. Like, I don't think I'm there. But it's the sexuality piece, really interesting. That kind of what's good, what's bad, you know, any sort of shame around that. And, you know, we were talking about Madonna the other week, and, you know, how she's owning this. And it's such an interesting question about how we identify as women.
Yeah, and we're so contained, I think. And I think, because Abby, you mentioned this conditioning thing, and I don't want to always bring it back to that, because I feel like as women we do need to kind of, to an extent, break free from the whole we're conditioned. But we still bloody well are, in the sense that, like, I mean, I think we talked a little bit about sexuality and the motherhood, But we've come back to full circle to the female body. I mean, it's astounding. If we think, there was a study done in 2017 where 2 independent researchers went around national chain retail stores in 2 UK cities, assessing female mannequins that were in these stores. Now, these are national chains, right? These represent the image of women that we're saying is, this is the beauty ideal. This is what you aspire to. This is the body size that women are, should be in an ideal world, right? And these female mannequins, 100% of the female mannequins they also looked at male mannequins, right? So the 100% of the female mannequins were classed through both visual and BMI rating scales as being underweight. Whereas I think it was about 6% of the male mannequins were underweight, right? So that's not changed. That was 2017, right? So that's 6 years ago. That's nothing. There's no policy that's been put out to change that. So if we're on a high street and we're looking at this female mannequin, that's what women are aspiring to be, and they're all underweight, right? That's not healthy. So when we think
Holly, I would love your take on the hormones affecting body shape. And by that, I don't mean just where the fat goes or like when we put on pounds or anything like that. I mean, when we look at celebrities and we, as in the society, praises them for, oh, they're still the same size they were when we were 25, or even, I was going through some albums as I was moving the other day, and I saw my shape is broadly the same, when I was like 19, but I know that my body has filled out in a way that could not be changed with any sort of nutrition or exercise, because hormones, and I'm now a woman as opposed to an older young girl, basically. And that's, when you talk about conditioning, that's the thing, isn't it? When people are getting this praise through the press about this person hasn't changed shape, and you're like, but hold on, hormones do, right? They do fill us out. And I don't just mean body fat wise, the actual sort of your size, right? For some people.
I mean, there's so many things there. I mean, that I'm also child free. Okay, so I'm saying this with a sense of, but women who have had children, there are changes that take place in terms of different hormones that are released during pregnancy that cause ligaments to relax and hips to widen. In some women they go back, in some women they don't. So there are kind of structural changes that can happen and can take place. There's also, in terms of hormones, yes, I mean, the physiological changes that happen and occur through the 30s, the 40s, perimenopause, changing levels of estrogen and other hormones as well, they do influence actually fat distribution and actually where we hold water. And we also have receptors for hormones on all of our tissues, and those hormones actually also impact the way we metabolize sugar, so our metabolism, and that has a knock-on impact. There's an interrelationship there between dark chocolate's good for you. But these are
hang on, this is not product placement. This is not product placement. We just want to put that out there right now.
Oh, sure.
Although, no, if Lint does want to sponsor Project Woman,
covering up.
I love that.
Sorry, Holly, you're saying sugar. Yes,
there are changes that take place in terms of our metabolism that influence, not just where we store fat, but how much we store at what time, and how we use that energy then for fuel. So there's so many changes that potentially take place through a woman's life, and some women do become a little bit more androgenic in nature because we lose those hormones, and so we tend to become a little bit more truncal, because that we actually a little bit more body shape maybe shift a little bit in towards more of a male shape. Doesn't happen to every woman. It's very individual. And again, it's influenced by these hormones. It's influenced by tissue receptivity to those hormones and other lifestyle factors as well, interwoven into that, and our genetics. So yeah, a lot of it is crazy to think that, women actually are designed to change. If you think about what the female body is designed to do, that's a very small, in today's modern world, we actually have really long life expectancy. So that premenopausal stage is actually quite a short time in our life. Outside of that, we've got a long other stretches of life, and we're designed to change. Like we're not designed to be reproductively active for the whole of our life. I mean, we can still be sexually active, but I mean, reproductively active is slightly different, because the ovaries are supposed to shut down. It protects us as well, but it's, yeah, I hope I kind of answered that question. I think that was a very muffled way of doing that.
No, it was great. It was great. I love hearing about the, you know, like you say, the receptors for hormones in the body. And I've written down women's bodies are designed to change. I absolutely love that. Love that.
100%.
Thank you.
Do you know, I was going to say something and I've completely forgot what it is. I'm going to admit that I'm in the latter half of my menstrual cycle, where words and conversations just drop out like a hat. What I need is some of Charlotte's chocolate here with me right now. If only it was
It could be
melted.
teleported through the
Wouldn't that be
screen.
amazing? Wouldn't that be phenomenal?
Yeah.
Coming back to, actually, I've just remembered, with regards to permission comes to mind when it comes to female health. And we talk about this identity, and Holly, you said about not keep going backwards. And I am a firm believer of this. I don't want to keep going backwards. I feel that we need to move forwards now. And what was highlighted recently when the government said no to the menopause leave.
Sorry.
You are
it wasn't that. It was why they said no. It wasn't that. It was why they said no.
Yeah. That's just it.
Which is nonsense. Because when they said, you know, it's not equitable, you're like, so what are you now saying that you wouldn't give? So why do you give women different maternity leave then? Because their bodies are different.
It was decided. A group of men decided it would be I can't do big words. It would be discriminating against men if they did this for women. A group of men decided this.
But that's what I mean. It's just crazy, right? Because you treat women. So even with shared parental leave, a woman has to have the first 4 months because of the impact on the body. So they acknowledge, the government of the day acknowledges that a woman's body and impact on her body is different to a man in an equitable situation like shared parental leave. It's even then a woman has to have the first 4 months. Then after that, then the man can take. So that's still equitable. So this same reasoning is complete bollocks, quite frankly.
Yeah, I was so angry.
Which brings me to my point, though, which is, what are we going to do about it? And as individuals, what are you going to do about it? Your health, your investment. You know, we can sit here, getting angry is good, expressing it is good, creating conversation is good.
Yeah.
But don't wait for something like the government to tell you that you can be healthy. No. Start investing in that yourself. Start understanding what your period stands for, so that you've got a better chance of going through menopause a lot wiser and a lot stronger and a lot more confident. Understand what menopause is. Understand what female health is, and the differences and the nuances that Charlotte and Holly have been speaking about. Make yourself the intelligent woman you was born to be. And, you know, coming back to what you said about the coaches, and we know so much of this now about, it was great to not have a period because it's not going to stop you and slow you down. Actually, having your period gives you more of a physiology of a man. So you're able to go harder and faster. And these athletes found that when they were on their period, they were performing their best. How amazing is that? But the misunderstanding from the opposite sex was that a period created an inconvenience. And anything, going back to Hippocrates, any human with a womb was classified as hysterical. You know, phenomenal. And this still lingers. This is what I mean about, I don't want to keep looking back, but it still lingers and it's still there. And unfortunately, it's permeated the mindset, however you want to term it, of women now. Yeah. Women believe this.
It's so true. Like for me, starting my menopause, brand new job, PA, supporting the CEO. I was in that job 5 years and I had the most horrendous time with my menopause. And I never told him because I was scared how I would be perceived, that I would be judged. I would be thought of as being over the hill and too old. I didn't feel old. In fact, I still felt quite youthful, but I was really worried how I would be judged. And again, it's that perception of like a woman who's on her period, oh, she's going to be emotional, or a woman going through the menopause, oh, she's past it, she's over the hill. You know, it's just, it's so frustrating because it's just a different society now. We think different, we look different, yet there are still dated ways of thinking, and that comes from men, it comes from other women as well, and it's just going. I've always been aware of my body, and I've always monitored my periods. Was on the pill when I was when I turned 18. As soon as I thought, oh, I'm going to have sex, and then I hit my mid-20s. I wasn't with anyone, and I actually stopped taking the pill, and I never took it again. So I was always really aware of my body, always monitored my periods each month. But I tell you something, hitting the menopause has really taught me a lot and really opened my mind to actually what the female body is and what it can do and what it's capable of. And for me, going through the menopause has been very much enlightening. I feel a sense of power, more of an ownership, proud of my body, definitely. Like in my 50s, I think I was 51, I deadlifted 100 kg. I mean, I was like, wow. I didn't do that I just about saw the inside of a gym in my 20s, 30s and 40s. I turned 50, I was like, right, I'm going to exercise. I was like, what happened? But then I think that was me just owning it, going through so much with my menopause. And I'm just like, I love me. I love me. I love what I can achieve. I want to achieve more. And my age and the menopause is not a barrier. It's not a barrier. For me, it's not.
I love that.
Yeah. Owning it, Faye. And this is the beauty. I think there's a thread here with everything in that as your menstruation began to disappear, Faye, and you stepped into menopause, like the clarity that it offered, like that there came an opportunity which took you to greatness. Same for you, Holly. I mean, your periods disappeared, but look where you are now, a fountain of knowledge. We have these opportunities. We can either step into it and grow, can't we? Or we can hide away from it and bury our head in the sand. And unfortunately, that takes you further away from your health and living a great life. You know, there's this woman that is on social media at the moment. I think she's 75. She's a lawyer. Have you seen her? She's doing push-ups on kettlebells. She's lunging with bars on her shoulder. I mean, she's an absolute animal. And I'm like, I want to be like you. I want to move. I might not be able to do a backflip when I'm in 75 or 80, but I want to be able to move really well and to be able to sit on the floor and roll around and enjoy the things that I do now with my body. You know, I'm not naive to think that there are certain things that will begin to perhaps not be available, but in my eyes, I want to keep moving and enjoying life as much as I can because I value it. I value life, and I believe that when you look after yourself, you get so much more from it. Yeah,
totally. Charlotte, like you, I had a really hard time accepting I wasn't going to have children. I tried various different methods and stuff, and it wasn't to be. And it's funny what we said about that was my identity. I was going to be a mum, no matter what I was going to be. It was going to happen. It was just going to be the most natural process ever. Yeah, that didn't quite work out. But I currently have 6 godchildren. Yep. I have 6 godchildren.
But it's so funny, isn't it? It feels sometimes like a betrayal of your body, right? Because this is what you just assume. You know, lots of people in this space talk about the irony of spending quite a lot of our sexually active time trying not to get pregnant, and then
That's
when you do want to, and then there's a blame. What have I done? Why isn't it working? But there really feels like a betrayal of going back to how our body usually works. Like, what it usually does, or what we've been told it's here for, what we've been told we exist for.
Yeah.
And it felt like an utter betrayal of my body. It's interesting, really interesting. The first time for me was my body carried on acting pregnant even though it was dead. Like that was, and I didn't therefore find out till a scan, which that was really difficult, you know, to know that all that stuff, like I didn't have any signs. You know, so that was really hard. And I was like, well, can I trust my body? And I guess, like with amenorrhea, like when something changes, it in terms of confidence in your body and yourself, it can disappear, because what you used to rely on to tell you stories or to give you information, it's not, it lied. Like, you know, it's interesting, isn't it? Those pieces. Yeah,
Really is.
but I'm delighted you've got excellent godchildren.
Oh, they keep me on my toes, trust me. I think the oldest one is coming up to 18 now. So it's like, great.
Yeah. There's something I wanted to mention actually about when we talk about moving forwards and what we're going to do about it, investing in ourselves. And when we talk about conditioning, and I know we say, we don't want to keep saying that we are, but what is really important to remember in terms of making changes, in terms of investing in ourselves, in terms of being aware, we need to be aware that conditioning isn't just because we were heavily conditioned up to the age of like 7 and then again up to age of 13, because we're taking everything in and we're making our rules about how the world work at that time. And that's essentially what drives us. Most of us have a 7-year-old running our lives, whether we like to admit it or not. That's literally what happens. But knowing that, you can then take responsibility and move forwards. Is when we start to say, oh, make an excuse for it. It's more about understanding that our subconscious is driving us 85% of the time. 85%. So we can allow ourselves not to shame ourselves for maybe not moving forwards, or not having the confidence to do something, or not investing in ourselves, because somewhere along the line, I mention this all the time, it makes sense to a part of our being that we behave like this. So if we can acknowledge conditioning, and we acknowledge 85% of the subconscious, which runs the show, then we can go, okay, that's great. And then we can actually use some sort of processing, like whether it's coaching or therapy or something like that, to actually change that, because you can change it. But it's more like we have to accept and be aware first, look at those beliefs that tell us what we can do, what we can't do, what are we going to do about it. And when we come up against resistance about making a change or that might be like investing in ourselves, understanding that there's something in there that's trying to stop us for a good reason. And then we can, when we look at it, then you can actually look at that again, that neurological levels. You make a change higher up, it makes a behavioral change. So there's definitely something around understanding that the awareness of that conditioning, the awareness that also we keep doing it. It's not like it stops. We are subject to millions, and I mean millions of bytes of information going into our head every single minute of every day. Like they estimate something like multi-millions pieces of information come into our being, and we have to filter them. And we've all got different filters which delete, distort, and generalize. So again, this awareness of what your own are and the stories therefore that you create, which may enable you or disable you from doing things, is a really important piece, because then we can go, right, I'm going to do this. And then it feels scary. Like, that's okay. I can change that story. I can change that belief. I can change that piece of conditioning. But we can't do that if we don't accept we have it to start with. So I think that's helpful for anyone who's really inspired by Abby's question of what are we going to do about it? Like, okay, I'm going to do something. And then your body goes, no, it's too scary, run away. And then you go, oh, I'm so terrible. I'm not doing anything. I'm a terrible human. You shame. But this is why I tell people all the time, 85%. Compassion, because 85% is trying to be like, no, stay safe. So again, stepping outside to make any sort of change can feel scary. So again, allowing that, and then not just feel the fear and do it anyway, but almost feel the fear, calm your tits, and then build a process to kind of and be kind of sort of executive about it, right? And be like, proactive. Right, I'm going to take this action because I know that this is my piece, which is why your own personal journey is very important, because you need your Holly, if you started writing journal, correcting awareness, Fay, Abby, whatever, ours would all be very different. So knowing your own stuff is really important, to know which bits you can tweak to make this amazing change, to invest in yourself.
So just coming back to that conversation about control, I've just tried to stop a dog from attacking a small child whilst remaining composed.
did a great job. I can't see
Thanks.
any blood.
exactly.
Like it looks.
And Dad arrives at the most opportune moment when our conversation's nearly fixed. Daddy's back.
Hello.
The saviour, the patriarchal saviour walked through the door. Go, kids, go. I do nothing, by the way. I do nothing. Anyway, where was we?
Right.
Back in the room. She's back in the room. I feel that our conversation is beginning to come to a close. I have loved sitting here with all of you, and I feel that there has been such a thread weaved between everyone's knowledge and wisdom and experience, from Amenorrhea to that of working with confidence, Charlotte. And the aim of Project Woman is to offer intelligent, interesting, curious conversation, because that's what women are and that's what they deserve. And it's so that we can create a greater conversation with our fellow men. You know, I feel that our relationship and our conversation needs an update, an upgrade, whatever word you resonate with. And I honestly believe that you will find that here. So thank you so much, you gorgeous women, for joining us here. It's been awesome sitting here on the panel with you. But is there anything that you would like to offer before we depart this YouTube coil of life?
Face like,
I just want women to be more respectful of each other. I think like we all have a common purpose about what we do, really, to empower ourselves and to empower others with our knowledge and what we know and what we do. But I still think there's still such negativity against women. So like, take the menopause, for example, really quickly. Take HRT, don't take HRT. And both camps judge the other one. And I just want there to be an acceptance of an individual's choice on what they want, and let's just be nicer to each other. That's my thing.
yeah.
Just say drugs.
Yeah.
Drugs aren't
Love
terrific.
that, Faye. I love that. And also remembering, I think linked to that, I will offer people that, like I said, the first stage of anything is awareness. So awareness of your being, right? So you know, Holly's expertise is all of that around the body and the hormones, and like that's really important. Like the more you can get to know that, the more you can sense out changes that might be impacting or might be symptoms of something lower down. But it's the same with our entire being. And if you are being judgmental of somebody, just know, I love this and I hate it at the same time, which is just know that how you judge others is how you most harshly judge yourself. So whenever the theme around it, judgy. So when we all do it, we love a bit of judginess. But when we're doing it, look at the theme. That is your gold sort of finger pointing, being like, this is how I'm judging, shaming, dealing with myself. So that's really interesting. So look at that. So if you want, so again, this is awareness. So I'd offer people start with the A of any sort of change is that awareness. Once you're aware, it's like you can't unsee it. You cannot unsee it. So if you do tend to judge people by what they look and that, rather, and not, it doesn't mean you hound them in the street or you berate them on Twitter or Instagram. It's just if a thought comes in like, oh my God, what are they wearing? Just know that that's one of the things you most harshly look at yourself, like, oh God, what a fucking state.
Charlotte,
Yeah.
Can I just say, like, I've got these images of you and having conversations with yourself. I love it, but I also hate it.
I do, but it is. So again, I've been watching. So I mean, I adore Brené Brown, but the reason I think so many of us love her is because she's so relatable. Because she says, like, you know, what's going to kill you? Self-righteousness. She's like, but you know what? It feels so good. Like, and she kind of talks about how we all love to be a bit self-righteous, right?
Yeah.
Because it just feels amazing. But it is killing us. Like, you know, it's really bad for our being to be like that, because then we are othering ourselves, other people, and we are trying to then also, that means we're setting unattainable standards for ourselves. Like there's all this stuff. So that's what I would offer to people. If you are doing what Faye says and judging and not being nice to people, just know that we're hardwired to compare and do this. Notice it, be aware, and then think, now how is it that I do that to myself day to day? There you go.
I love it, Charlotte. Love it.
Yeah, I love that as well. I love that. And I was just thinking about I'm just thinking in my head all the ways that I do that. I know exactly.
Did you
what
watch
I'm doing.
Sex in the City? I
What
used to watch Sex in
judging?
the
Are you
City.
talking about judging?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
But
judge
do you remember
somebody.
Sex in the City when
Yes.
when Samantha says they're talking about judging? She goes, "It's what we do. Some people do arts and crafts. We judge. Maybe we're not that bad, but everybody does. Everyone does do that." But anyway, sorry.
No, but I do. I'm processing. Yeah, I do that with this person in particular, and I know exactly why now. Okay, so, and this is again, it's my own sense of inadequacy in an area of my life, right? So,
And that's fine, and there's no shame around it. The best bit is
No.
to not shame yourself.
It's important. I'm going to try and link into that. So this inadequacy. I think a lot of women have a sense of inadequacy, whatever it is. I've had children and I've not done this career thing that I wanted to do. I've not had children. I'm just not good enough in some way. And I think that my thing I want to leave is that we are all deserving, everybody, male, female, gender, all genders, all whatever. We're all deserving. Particularly women, who then we come back to this idea of conditioning. We're not worthy. We're not worthy. We're not worthy. We're all worthy of. In my case, I'm going to tie it back to nutrition. Nourishing ourselves with food, good connection, sleep, all these things. We often, and it does happen a lot to mums, I know, because obviously you just don't think. My mum friends are just on autopilot all the time. Do not have time to sit down and make themselves a nice square meal, make sure they've got all of their essential fatty acids in there, all of their protein, their, all of these wonderful nourishing things, all the polyphenols that they need, the fiber that they need to, all of the things that they don't do that. And we're all deserving of that nourishment. So I guess that's what I want to leave really, is that, you deserve to eat well, sleep well, have the connection that you need in your life, whatever else that you need to function and be well, is that we are all deserving of that. Yeah, that's it.
I like it.
I love that.
Nice one, Holly. It's a nice way to
Thank
bring this
you.
to a close, I think. Thank you, you gorgeous women. And thank you for watching and tuning in. If you want to reach out to any of us, our details will be below. And I think that's quite nice. Strike up a conversation with someone that you don't know. Ask a question that you might not ask anyone else, because this is the beauty of it. All right, my darlings. And on that note, as the dog goes to attack my child, let's sign out.
Thanks for having us.
See you later.